The Texas horizon stretched wide like a promise that had forgotten its end. The sun rose in gold and amber hues, washing over the ranchlands of Hollow Creek. The wind carried the scent of hay, dust, and a whisper of rain that never came. Horses snorted in the stables, restless, as the day began with a slow rhythm of hooves and heartbeats. Sarah Winslow drove down the old dirt road, her little car kicking up trails of red dust behind her. She wasn't sure why she'd come. Maybe it was desperation, maybe hope, maybe something in between. All she knew was that she needed a place to start over. The city had left her hollow, the faces too fast, the nights too cold, and when the last doctor told her what she already feared, that she would never have children, something in her broke quietly, like glass underfoot. The Hollow Creek Ranch was the kind of place that felt suspended in time. Fences leaned with age, barns held the stories of generations, and the house, paint-peeling but proud, stood as though it had weathered every storm Texas had thrown at it. She'd seen the ad in a local paper, help wanted, housekeeper in hand, room and board included, apply in person. When she arrived, a tall man in a worn hat stood on the porch, leaning against a post. His shirt was rolled up to his elbows, the fabric faded from years of sun, his boots coated in the same red dust that now clung to her tires. He was all lines and quiet strength, the kind of man who spoke more with his eyes than his words. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "You must be Sarah." She nodded, stepping out of the car. "Yes, sir. You're Mr. Daniels." "Jack," he corrected with a half-smile. "Nobody calls me Mr. out here unless I'm in trouble." There was a warmth in his voice that softened her nerves, but not enough to quiet them completely. She'd been turned down enough times to expect it again. He motioned toward the porch steps. "Coffee's fresh. Let's talk a minute." Inside, the smell of roasted beans and fresh bread filled the kitchen. The walls were lined with old photographs, cowboys, children, horses, and the air hummed with the kind of silence that comes only from wide-open spaces. Jack poured her a mug, black and steaming. "You ever worked on a ranch before?" "Not exactly," she admitted, staring into the dark liquid. "But I'm a fast learner. I can cook, clean, and, well, I don't mind hard work." He studied her face a long moment. "You look like you've seen a bit of it already." Sarah smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Guess you could say that." From the other room came the sound of children laughing, a chorus of voices tumbling and tripping over each other. In the doorway appeared a girl no older than 10, her hair braided and her cheeks smudged with jam. "Daddy, Charlie let the chickens in the house again." Jack groaned softly, setting his coffee down. "I'll deal with it. Go on, sugar." The girl grinned and ran off, leaving muddy footprints behind. Sarah couldn't help but smile. "How many kids do you have?" she asked. "4, Jack said with a chuckle. "And that's not counting the dogs, goats, or chickens that think they live inside." "4?" she repeated, her voice soft. "That's a lot." "Yeah. Their mama passed 3 years ago." He paused, his eyes clouding just a little. "Been me and them ever since." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. There was something in the way he said it, matter of fact but not bitter. He'd built a life around loss, the way cowboys build fences, quietly, one post at a time. He looked at her again, steady and kind. "You got family?" She hesitated. Not anymore. There was more she could have said. About the man who'd left when she couldn't give him children. About the nights she spent staring at nursery catalogues that would never matter. But she didn't. Not yet. Jack stood, stretching. "Well, the kids could use a steady hand around here. If you're not afraid of dust and noise, you're welcome to stay on." Trial. Her chest lifted with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. "You can take the room at the end of the hall. Fresh sheets, I think. Holler if you find a snake in the dresser." That earned him her first real laugh in months. The days that followed settled into rhythm. Sarah woke with the dawn, helped with breakfast, washed dishes, while the children chased each other around the kitchen table. She learned to feed horses, mend fences, and dodge the mischievous twins who thought frogs were fair game for practical jokes. In the evenings, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned violet, Jack would sit on the porch with his guitar. His voice was deep, worn smooth by time, and the kids would pile around his feet as he sang old country songs that spoke of loss, faith, and love found in the quiet places. Sarah would stand by the doorway, her arms crossed, pretending to tidy something just so she could listen. It felt almost like a dream, simple, steady, safe. But she knew better than to trust peace. It always came with a price. One night, as the stars blinked awake, Jack found her sitting by the barn fence, staring into the dark pasture. The air was cool, the kind that carried a whisper of autumn. "You did good with the kids today," he said, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. She smiled faintly. "They're good kids. Wild, but good." He laughed. "Yeah, they got that from their daddy. For a while, they just stood there, silence settling between them like an old friend. The crickets sang, the horses shifted in their stalls, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you ever think about leaving the city for good?" She hesitated. "I think about it every day, but there's things out there I can't change. Things that follow me no matter where I go." Jack leaned against the fence, his gaze steady. "You don't strike me as the run-in kind." "I'm not," she said softly. "I'm just trying to find where I belong." He nodded slowly. "Well, Hollow Creek's big enough for lost souls and new starts." Something in her chest ached at that, the simplicity of it, the kindness. Then, after a long pause, she spoke the words that had haunted her for years. "Jack, there's something you should know." He looked at her, waiting. "I can't have children." The words came out brittle, heavy like stones. She braced herself for the silence that always followed, for the pity, for the distance. But Jack didn't look away. He didn't frown. He didn't shift awkwardly or change the subject. He just smiled. Slow, gentle, and certain. "Good," he said softly. "I've got enough kids for both of us." Sarah blinked, caught between disbelief and relief. For the first time in years, she felt the tightness in her chest ease. The wind blew through the fields, and she swore it carried something new. Hope, or maybe forgiveness. Jack pushed off the fence, tipping his hat. "Get some rest, Sarah. Morning comes early." As he walked away, Sarah watched him disappear into the porch light's glow. And for the first time since the world told her she wasn't enough, she felt like maybe she was. She looked up at the stars, bright, countless, unbroken, and smiled. The dust settled. The dawn waited. And in that moment, Hollow Creek didn't feel like someone else's world anymore. It felt like home. The weeks turned to months, and the rhythm of life at Hollow Creek began to feel like a song Sarah already knew by heart. Mornings were filled with the clatter of dishes and laughter spilling down the hallway, afternoons with the smell of sun-warmed hay, and nights with the slow hum of the prairie wind through open windows. The ache that used to live inside her, the one that whispered she'd never be enough, had started to fade, replaced by the steady comfort of belonging. The children had claimed her long before she realized it. There was Lily, with her curious mind and endless chatter, who followed Sarah everywhere, asking questions about everything from cooking to constellations. The twins, Charlie and Ben, wild as the wind, constantly tracked mud through the kitchen and insisted frogs made good pocket companions. And then there was Emma, the quiet one, who rarely spoke but always watched with eyes too wise for her years. Each of them had found their way into Sarah's heart, not by force, but by simple daily grace. Jack noticed it too. He'd see her sitting on the porch swing, Lily in her lap and the twins tumbling at her feet, and something inside him softened, a feeling he hadn't let himself touch in years. She brought light into the house, laughter back to the walls, and peace to the restless ache he'd carried since his wife Maggie passed. He didn't speak much about Maggie, but Sarah saw her everywhere. In the faded photographs lining the mantel, in the soft way Jack looked at his daughters, in the quiet spaces of the house where her absence still echoed. Sarah never tried to replace her. She just tried to fit into the cracks life had left behind, and somehow she did. But peace, as she'd learned before, never came without a storm. It began one afternoon when the sky turned an ugly shade of green-gray, the kind that made even the cattle restless. Jack stood out by the corral, eyes narrowed against the horizon. "Storm's comin'," he muttered. Sarah was by his side, tucking her hair behind her ear as the wind picked up. "Bad one?" "Could be." He looked at her, his tone gentle but firm. "Get the kids inside, will you? I'll see to the horses." The air grew thick, the sky darker by the minute. By the time Sarah got the children settled inside, rain had begun to lash against the windows. The sound of thunder rolled across the plains like distant cannon fire. Jack came in drenched, slamming the door behind him. "That one's mean," he said, wiping his brow. "We'll ride it out here." But as the storm raged, lightning struck closer. Too close. A sudden crash shook the house, followed by the unmistakable scent of smoke. "The barn!" Jack shouted, grabbing his coat. "Jack, no!" Sarah cried. "It's too dangerous. I got horses in there, Sarah." He barked back, already pulling open the door. Without thinking, she followed him into the storm. The rain was blinding, sheets of water pouring from the heavens as thunder split the air. The barn was ablaze, flames clawing up the wooden beams, horses screaming in panic. "Jack!" she screamed. He was already inside, cutting through the ropes, leading the terrified animals out one by one. Sarah grabbed a blanket and ran to help, her fear forgotten. Smoke burned her lungs, tears and rain mixing on her face. Together they freed the last horse just as a beam cracked overhead, falling in a shower of sparks. Jack grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her clear as the roof collapsed behind them. They stumbled into the mud, coughing and shaking, the barn a blazing inferno in the distance. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the rain and their ragged breaths filled the air. Then Jack turned to her, his face streaked with soot. "You shouldn't have come out there." "I wasn't going to let you die alone," she shot back, voice trembling. He blinked, the corner of his mouth twitching despite the chaos around them. "Stubborn woman. Someone has to be," she said, her lips curving faintly. They laughed then, tired, wet. Half crazy with adrenaline, but the kind of laughter that comes only when fear has burned itself out and left something raw and real behind. When the fire finally died and the rain softened to a drizzle, they stood together in silence, watching the smoke curl into the dark sky. "It's just wood," Jack said quietly. "We'll build it again." Sarah looked at him then, really looked. The lines on his face, the grit in his eyes, the gentleness that lived beneath it all, and something inside her shifted. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jack found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a mug of untouched tea. Her hands were trembling slightly. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, though she wasn't sure, just thinking. "'Bout what?" She hesitated. "How everything can burn down so fast. How you can lose everything you thought you needed, and somehow still be standing." Jack leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Yeah, life's funny that way. Sometimes what you think you lost is just making room for what's coming next." His words settled deep. She looked up at him, her voice soft. "I thought I was broken, Jack, for a long time. When I found out I couldn't have kids, I thought that was the end of the story, like my whole life was over before it began." He crossed the room and set a hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, look at me." She did. "You see those kids sleeping down the hall? You make 'em laugh. You keep this house together. You think they care where they came from? Family ain't blood, darling. It's the people who stay." Her throat tightened. "Why are you so kind to me?" Jack smiled, that same soft smile that had undone her the night by the fence. "Because someone's got to be. The days that followed were hard. Rebuilding, repairing, finding new rhythm, but they did it together. Jack would teach her how to mend fences, and she'd teach him how to bake without burning everything in sight. The kids began calling her Miss Sarah, and sometimes, when the twins forgot themselves, Mama Sarah slipped out instead. Each time it did, her heart cracked open a little more. Then, one evening, as the last beams of sunset painted the fields gold, Jack found her on the porch, watching the kids chase fireflies. They love you, you know, he said quietly. She smiled. I love them too. He stepped closer. And me? She turned to him, eyes searching his. What are you asking, Jack? He took off his hat, rubbing the brim nervously. I'm asking if you see yourself staying here. Not just for a while, but for good. The wind stirred. The children's laughter echoed across the yard. I don't know if I deserve that, she whispered. Darling, he said softly, you deserve everything good that's ever been kept from you. She felt tears welling, not of sadness, but of release. He reached out, his rough hand finding hers. You said once you can't have kids. Well, turns out I've got enough love and enough noise for both of us. What I don't got is someone to share it with. Till you showed up. The sun slipped behind the hills, and the sky burned orange one last time. Sarah looked at the man before her, the cowboy who smiled when the world had turned its back on her, and knew her wandering had finally ended. I'll stay, she said softly. He smiled, slow and sure, the way the earth smiles at rain. Good, and when he leaned in, the world around them, the fields, the sky, the wind, seemed to hold its breath. It wasn't the rush of romance or the spark of lust. It was something steadier, deeper, the quiet promise of two broken hearts choosing not to be alone anymore. Later, when the stars rose and the children had fallen asleep, Sarah stood by the window, watching the night settle over Hollow Creek. The land stretched endless, the sky vast, and her heart, once so empty, felt full for the first time. She whispered to the quiet, "Thank you." And somewhere outside, under the blanket of stars, the old barn owl called, soft, haunting, and home.